This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everyone. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Straczynski. On today's show, this major wrestling star is making his return, and this WWE wrestler will be sidelined for a while. Also, could this wrestler be heading back to WWE? And are we getting a new member of the Bloodline? We're going to break all of that down, discuss it. We've got Crown Jewel results. We've got new WWE Women Mid-Card Championships we've got to talk about. And, of course, we're going to take a look at AEW. Help me sort it all out, break it all down, discuss it all, add a couple of topics into the hopper. He's the one. He's the only. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Man, cuz, what a week of wrestling. Excited to talk about everything that went down. Crown Jewel was very unique. A lot of interesting reviews that came from it because typically WWE delivers on their matches, and some of the matches kind of just didn't feel like they were pay-per-view worthy. And it was very interesting to see the reaction, the fallout. WWE now kind of going in the direction in which they're moving towards Survivor Series and how things are going. And AEW now is trying to do new angles, but unfortunately, they went up against a juggernaut in NXT on Wednesday, which was a crazy, crazy thing to kind of explore. Lots to get into. Where are we starting this week, cuz?
Let's start with Crown Jewel. That took place probably in chronological order. That took place the earliest. So that was last Saturday. Overall, look, I thought it was a decent pay-per-view, right? It kind of served its purpose. Again, this isn't a show for the WWE Universe. This isn't a show for the fans. They've done a good job of trying to work storyline into this show, but we all know what this show is for. This is a gigantic money grab for the company, and this is a show specifically for the Saudi prince and for the wrestling fans over in Saudi Arabia. All that being said, we kicked the show off with Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, and Tama Tonga taking on Roman Reigns and the Usos. In the end, Solo gets the pin on Roman. This is something we talked about when we were previewing this. We kind of felt like at a certain point, the new Bloodline was going to have to get that big win, get that pin on the OG Bloodline. Specifically, Roman Reigns had to take the pin because you have to make Solo feel like he's important. I don't necessarily know if this match did that, but you got it. So now you can add that to the canon, you can add that to the storyline, and you can kind of go from there. I think the big criticism coming out of this match, and this was levied by a guy like Dave Meltzer, who respected in the business, also criticized in the business, but Dave had a perspective that it felt like the participants were mailing this match in. He said that he felt like it was only Jacob Fatu who was treating this like it was a pay-per-view. Did you get the same feeling watching this match unfold?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. It just kind of feel like the chemistry was a little bit off. You know, it was weird because a lot of people kind of online said the same thing. It just kind of felt like a house show match, and it didn't feel like a match that was worthy of kicking off a PLE. And I do think maybe they were, in a situation in which maybe the position of the match hurt it, maybe being first. I don't get why it didn't deliver. It just kind of did. You never want to say wrestlers go through the motions, but but based on the way the match was laid out and kind of how it went, it just didn't feel like it was clicking on all cylinders. And then when you have a Jacob Fatu who was going, it felt like maybe like 10% harder than everybody else. So it made it look like it stood out a little bit differently. I thought that was, I was expecting that match to potentially steal the show, and it fell short. And I think that's where people were disappointed because it was one of those deals where expectations for the match far outlived what we got in the ring.
And then after the match, you have the new Bloodline basically decimating the OG Bloodline, just going to town on Roman Reigns specifically, going to town on Jey Uso. This brings out Sami Zayn, And look, going into this pay-per-view, Sammy and Solo had a conversation. They were seen in the background of a Jimmy and Jay conversation. You weren't sure what side Sami Zayn was going to be on, and Sammy ends up coming out and he ends up suplexing Solo Sikoa, and he ends up siding with the Bloodline, but with the OG Bloodline. But in the end, he ends up going to haluva kick Solo, and Roman is going, and they end up taking each other out as Solo ducks it. Did you like the addition and the twist of adding Sami Zayn and then adding some of that consternation into this storyline?
Yeah, because that's kind of how you're telling the story of Sami Zayn and his involvement. People want him, but at the same token, there's trust issues. There's been situations in planting seeds of, hey, is Sami Zayn worthy of being part of this again? Does he feel like he needs to be part of it again? Does he want to be part of it again? And you recognize, look, there's a little bit of a cliffhanger, but in the end, Sami Zayn understood what happened. But unfortunately, mistakes happen in the ring, and you're setting it up potentially down the road. Maybe one day Roman and Sammy eventually, at some point handle business and address their feud. And it's a long-term way to build it too, because I'd like to see a match with Roman and Sammy at some point for something valuable. And it'll be very interesting down the road to see how it continues to play out. But maybe the involvement of a wise man can resolve all the tensions that have befallen the Bloodline 1.0. So we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, it's good to get Solo the win in that group, because you want to continue to build their credibility as the story progresses.
Our next match was Jade Cargill, Bianca Belair defending their championships against Kairi Sane and Io Sky, Lash Legend, and Jakara Jackson, and Chelsea Green and Piper Niven. In the end, Jade Cargill, Bianca Belair retain their titles. I felt like this was a good spot where you really could have highlighted some of these other tag teams in the women's division, and I felt like you kind of got halfway there, right? I felt like you did a good enough job. Look, I think when Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson get called up and they're more of a prime time player on the main card, I think they're going to be fine. I feel like Chelsea Green and Piper Niven, specifically Chelsea Green, has done a lot of great work in some of her recent matches. And I just don't feel like she's necessarily getting the credit she deserves. And it felt like this was a spot where you could have crowned a new champ. It would have been fine. We could have then moved on to something that we'll talk about a little bit later on, where you could get this breakup of Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair. Instead, you're keeping them together, and it feels like it's a story that is just kind of not really going anywhere. It's kind of stagnating. But in the end, the champs retain the belts. I know when we did our picks, that was who you had. Would you have preferred to have seen somebody else walk out with the championships in this match?
No, because I think in my predictions I said it, that the best tag team in the match won the match. So, I know back and forth, you have a good point to say that some of these other tag teams need a little bit more. I do think that Chelsea Green, it's time to kind of elevate her a little bit beyond what she's doing. I think that she's put in the work to be a star. She's put in the work to be in higher profile matches. I do think that she's already there. But at the same time, I'll just take the other stance, is that sometimes you also have to highlight the champs. And I think Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill are the best team. They were the best team in the ring. They're the most over team, and they deserve to keep the belt. And I think that, you can't be changing the belts at that rate every 80 days. You could have a nice run with these ladies and let them go through some tag teams, let them go through some things. And that way, when it does end up happening where they lose it the next time, that the person, because I think the first time they lost the belts, the tag team that had it, that won it, didn't really get, massively over because of it. I think that you got to do more to build the credibility of the belt that you have, and the people that won it. I just think that, Bianca and Jade together, I think, can grow and do some things. It's just unfortunate that it's just hard to build a plethora and depth in a tag team division, let alone the women's tag team division. But so far, so good. And definitely, I'm fond of the winner of that match. And still, the champs, baby. Let's go.
All right, her next match was Seth Rollins and Bronson Reed. Seth Rollins ends up getting the win here. This surprised me a little bit. I thought Bronson needed the victory, and you could have continued the storyline along. Instead, Seth gets the win, And it feels as though this feud is going to continue. Should this feud continue, especially with Seth coming out the winner?
Yeah, it was wild to see, but I find myself, looking back at it, when you see Seth, you just harken back to all the injuries, all the sacrifice he's made, and the star that he is. It's just really great for Bronson. Eventually speaking, I do think Bronson, it's one of those deals where technically the result's not going to matter for him. He's getting exposure. People are seeing the monster that he is, and at times the individual that's kind of the antagonist has to get do some things to bother the protagonist, and then I do think that's Seth Rollins coming out on top. It's just fine. I think that the run of bad luck that he's had with injuries and the year that he's had, it's kind of been different. When you look at it, it was shocking to see a post on social media that it was 10 years ago that he blew out his knee for the first time in a big way overseas. And it's like, man, 10 years, and the man's still grinding. You still kind of start to see Seth Rollins as a Shawn Michaels figure, like a big top-end star. And to me, I can never really say that Seth Rollins winning is a bad thing. I do think you want to build his momentum because there's some matches there. Gunther's, and here's the deal too, cuz if you look at it, if you have a 6-month plan ahead, if you want to do CM Punk, Seth Rollins, you kind of want to build up Seth Rollins to be at the kind of the level that CM Punk is going to be at by that time. And I do think that you set the stage, and unfortunately it's at the expense of a Bronson Reed, but Reed is still young in his career, and he'll benefit from the time in the ring, and maybe you build up the why in his growth is to say, hey, I've had some setbacks, I'm upset. You build his fury with all these losses. And I think everybody will be just fine with this feud. And I don't even mind it if, the results in the ring don't matter. At some point, Bronson Reed should cost Seth Rollins something important. And that's where you can continue to build him, get some heat on him moving forward.
Yeah, there's going to have to be a reason that you're going to have to add to really highlight how this thing's going to continue, because it just Bronson Reed coming down and attacking Seth Rollins and just kind of the back and forth. To me, it just doesn't do it. I need something bigger. I need some bigger stakes here. So we'll see what ends up happening and what creative has in store for us with this storyline. Our next match was the Women's World Championship match for the second largest belt in all of the land. You have Liv Morgan taking on Nia Jax. Liv Morgan ends up defeating Nia Jax. A lot of stuff going on the periphery with this match. You've got Raquel Rodriguez. She played a bit of a part. You had Tiffany Stratton playing a part. Like I said, in the end, Liv Morgan ends up getting the victory. But we're constantly getting this tease of Tiffany Stratton turning on Nia Jax. That is the one thing that is weaved into this storyline. That's the one thing that is really surrounding Nia Jax. I think we're all waiting. Look, I've told you last week, I'm going to continue to predict that Tiffany Stratton's going to cash in on Nia Jax, and one day I'll be right, because it's inevitable at this point. And at some point, I do feel like Tiffany Stratton will be turning face. Do you like the continued tease of Tiffany Stratton kind of being this antagonist for Nia Jax? And it's not even so much the antagonist where she's in her face and it's blatant. It's more a thing that's just kind of going on in the background. It's just kind of, you're just kind of looking a little bit side-eyed at Tiffany Stratton as she interacts with Nia Jax. You're picking up on little things here and there, and you're just like, okay, it's like a ticking time bomb. When is it going to happen? Do you like this to proceed in this manner, or do you just kind of want it to already happen? Let's just go. Let's get to Tiffy time. Let her run with her championship.
It's coming, and I think Paul is trolling you because he knows that you want it so bad. And he's like, I know that the IWC and certain podcasters want this to happen, and he's delaying it to the right time. It's getting there. The temperature's rising. The soup is tasting a little bit better, just needs a little bit more salt, a little bit more pepper, maybe a couple carrots here and there, a little bit more spice, and a little bit more heat. And once it gets to the right temperature, voila. It'll debut, maybe Survivor Series, maybe on the biggest stage. We'll see when it happens, but I think the timing is just right. You're building. It's great. Credit to Liv Morgan. I know you want to deflect and talk about Tiff, and maybe you're distracted by her attire and her persona, but credit to Liv Morgan for winning this match. I think that it was emotional for her. It was great for her to continue to build, and I think that, Nia could take the loss no problem. And in the end, I think the right person won. The crowd loved it. Everybody loved it. She was appreciative. You can also spin off now and start to kind of build more of the feud now with Nia Jax and Tiffany Stratton when that does take place. But all in all, it was a decent match. It did what it needed to do.
Yeah, it helped elevate, I think, Liv Morgan, and I think it helped kind of continue that story with Nia Jax, Tiffany Stratton. It was a good match. It was one of the shorter matches on the card. Our next match was Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. This was weird because this was supposed to be a match, but it really wasn't a match. This was a no contest. Kevin Owens basically annihilated Randy Orton, and they ended up brawling into the back. Why do you think that they did this? Like, you promised a match. We didn't really get a match. Kevin Owens ends up beating Randy Orton, and they kind of go from there. Was this done to protect Randy Orton, or was this done to protect Kevin Owens, or was this done to protect both of these guys to kind of get us to the next part of whatever this story is going to be?
Yeah, it's one of those deals where you're trying to mix in different results, and this is one I think that kind of made sense. That some matches, some feuds, in the time in which a match takes place, you just don't need a winner. This was about two guys pissed at each other and wanting to take it out in front of everybody else. And I think it's fine. Would we have liked a more traditional kind of match? Yeah, it would have been fine. But as we've seen what they've done moving forward, it's okay. As you continue to build simmer the tensions between the two, the whys and the trolling online back and forth, I thought it was just fine. And look, sometimes you have to kind of in the wrestling business leave them wanting a little bit more, and I think that was definitely the case from this one.
Our next match is LA Knight, who ends up defeating Andrade and Carmelo Hayes. This really seemed like it was an Andrade and Carmelo Hayes match, with LA Knight kind of interjecting at just the right time, ends up leaving with his belt. I don't think anybody's upset here. After this, our main event was the undisputed WWE champion Cody Rhodes taking on the world heavyweight champion Gunther for the world's largest title belt. Cody ends up defeating Gunther, and he defeats him clean. Was it a good call to defeat him clean? We thought possibly there could have been a Goldberg sighting, could have been a little bit of a distraction that cost Gunther. Instead, Cody Rhodes beats him clean, and Gunther shows respect, shakes Cody's hand, and ends up leaving the ring. Was that the best way to do it?
Maybe it's not the best way to say it, not the best way, because Gunther does take a little bit of a hit, but like we said to start the recap of the pay-per-view, sometimes you just got to elevate the people that are right at top, and I think Cody Rhodes is worthy of all the accolades. The company is raving about him being the guy at the top, and the guy at the top usually wins. And I thought what was crazy was it was kind of like an old school wrestling match. It's just, okay, it was not really bereft with high spots. It was just, here's a match, let's go, let's see each other do their thing. You had Gunther showcasing his physicality and Cody Rhodes showcasing his athleticism, and in the end, Cody wins. And I thought the pacing was great. I thought it had a main event feel, but it was one of those deals that it kind of, when you look at it, it was a feud that was put together for this. So you felt like you could have definitely built it differently if it was going to be done again. But down the road, I think that this will help Gunther and his character. And it's just tough to assess like the true meaning, because it's just really a glorified exhibition to give somebody a ring and to say, hey, you won a match that culminates in like the international title. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I get a ring. Great. Okay. But you beat Gunther. It's a big deal. Everybody sees it. But they're not on the same brand. You can revisit it later down the road, but it's not going to do anything because Gunther is going to continue to dominate on his brand. But in the end, what it showcases is the number one guy it used to be by a mile. Now it's by 6 miles, is Cody Rhodes. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, you can really tell that the company is incredibly happy with what they're getting out of him. He is the face of WWE right now. He is the guy. They look at him almost like he's a John Cena-esque type of figure. So look, whatever you want to think, this is the guy who they've got everything kind of pinned on. And look, I think Cody Rhodes does a fantastic job. I don't know if I would have beat Gunther clean. I feel like you now have a definitive. It wasn't a 1A 1B champion. Now you've got a 1A and you've got a number 2 to be champion. I feel like you said, they are miles apart, and this kind of shows how far apart they really are. In the end, Doc gets the point. You crushed it in the picks. Congratulations. You've now narrowed the lead, my lead, down to 2. It's 9.5 to 7.5. Now, Crown Jewel ends up rolling over into Monday Night Raw. They ended up taping Monday Night Raw in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and they ended up doing it, I believe it was that same night. Might have been the next night they did it. But coming away from Raw, what we got was a lot of multi-man challenges, a lot of multi-woman challenges, and coming out of it all, you have Io Sky, who's going to be Liv Morgan's next challenger, and you've got Damian Priest, who's going to be Gunther's next challenger. And I'm just curious if this was the best call, because you could have set some stuff up here with these matches. You could have set up that split of Bianca and Jade. There was a point where they were face-to-face with each other, and because they were involved in this multi-man or multi-woman match. They were face-to-face with each other, and they could have fought each other, and that could have led to them possibly splitting up, and you could have built some storyline there. Or with the men's match, you could have put Dominic in the mix with Gunther. That's something that's been teased. Instead, it really felt like Triple H kind of played it safe, going with Io Sky and going with Damian Priest as the next challengers for both of those respected titles. Was it the best call for Io Sky and Damian Priest to be the next challengers for Liv Morgan and Gunther?
Yeah, I'm okay with the calls. I think that people are intrigued. You continue to elevate the individuals, but the problem is nobody in the world expects them to win. So that's the tough part. And I think that what's tough is that you have such a different contrast with what's going on SmackDown that you can kind of clearly decipher what you're interested in. And right now, it's just really tough to say, outside of Seth Rollins, you say to yourself, okay, what's going on Raw? It kind of, the stark contrast in star power is really kind of starting to show. And Raw used to be the marquee place, and everybody would say that's the place. But ever since the Bloodline has kind of gone to SmackDown, it's chipped away. Clearly, Jey Uso is the guy, and everybody loves seeing it. But, man, it's tough because SmackDown is doing some tremendous shows. The 2 hours thing has helped Raw. I think it's really definitely helping everybody, but in the end, this will have to harken back to the WWE needs to be creative in trying to make it a little bit more believable that these two people are going to lose, because they're not.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think there was a missed opportunity here, right? And not so much that Io Sky and Damian Priest were the wrong calls, but I felt like you could have highlighted and you could have helped flesh out other stories or put different people in different spots, because we don't believe Damian Priest is beating Gunther this next time around. We don't believe Io Sky is beating Liv Morgan. So why not kind of build upon what we're all waiting for, Bianca and Jade, and why not try to insert Dominic into this picture? And all of a sudden, I think Dominic becomes a little bit more credible of a figure, and there could be the possibility that he does dethrone Gunther because he does have the Judgment Day behind him. The Judgment Day is going to play a role in every match that he has unless there's a steel cage, and even then, I feel like the Judgment Day could possibly get involved in that match. And to me, it just felt like creatively, you missed a mark. You missed a spot where you could have really amped up some storytelling. You missed a spot where you could have got really creative, and you kind of blew an opportunity to really highlight a guy like Dominic and really help make him seem more credible. Like when I see Dominic wrestle, he's gotten much better over the last couple years. But when I see Dominic wrestle, I don't see him and I don't think to myself, man, that's a future world champion. I feel like he wins this multi-man match. He becomes the number one contender. Him and Gunther kind of go back and forth. And as long as he's got Judgment Day in his back pocket, all of a sudden it helps elevate him. It helps elevate his mystique. It helps elevate him. And he seems like there's the possibility he could be Gunther. And if they get into a little bit of a sparring match, or if Dominic has to take on Ludwig Kaiser and he just annihilates Ludwig Kaiser, all of a sudden he starts to feel and you start to believe he's more credible than what maybe he currently is. So I do feel like it was a bit of a miss spot. I do feel like Triple H and the creative team was playing it very, very safe. On SmackDown, we ended up getting quite a bit of bloodline information. We got a lot of bloodline storytelling. We opened, there was some stuff in the middle with some backstage stuff, and in the end, that was how we closed the show. I think the big thing coming out of it with the bloodline is they teased a 5-man War Games match between the Bloodline 2.0 and the OG Bloodline. Would you want a 5-man team, or do you prefer this to be a 4-man team where you would have Roman Reigns, Jimmy and Jey Uso, and Sami Zayn? Because Sami and the OG Bloodline got things hashed out this week on SmackDown, taking on the Bloodline 2.0 of Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga Loa, and Jacob Fatu. Or would you prefer an extra member inserted into these teams, maybe adding a little bit of creativity, making things a little bit more interesting? Do you prefer the 5-man or do you prefer the 4-man for War Games?
Yeah, no, it has the feel that the best is 4 because those are the people that have been on the TV the longest. So it's just a fascinating look at WWE and where their decision making is, and more are coming. You could have, Cody and The Rock, at some point. So it probably would be that, or maybe some other members as well. But we'll see how this starts to shake out over the next few weeks. I'm curious because, the next step in this is going to be, what happens with Roman? Where does he take it with wins? Does he start to? What happens like after the decision? Does then Solo go back and revisit? Because you play both sides of it and you say what's going to happen after, and I think that's going to be the juicy part. Is then do the Usos go on a run in the tag team? Does one or the other go and have more main event success? What happens as a result of this? Maybe it's just and it's great to see, and I think that's where the intrigue is that you don't really know, and they could do a lot of different things. And so it's going to be fun to see, and Jacob Fatu is going to be a mega star, and you just hope that and I think too, what's great is that I think they can still elevate Solo even more. Like his promos are getting a little bit better, a little bit more intriguing, a little bit more in regards to the work that he's doing backstage. It's getting there, and now we can't wait to see what happens as a result of the Civil War that's about to take place in War Games. It's going to be great.
I do think Solo got a little bit distracted when he was trying to cut his promo this week and trying to set up War Games. I think the crowd maybe kind of took him out of it, or maybe just the moment being across from Roman might have kind of grabbed his attention just a little bit, because he did seem to fumble a little bit, but Roman was there to kind of pick it up and kind of clean it up. So that was nice to see. If we were to go to a 5-man team, you've already teased maybe your selections here. If we were to go to a 5-man team, who would you want the 5th man to be? Would you want it to be Roman, or would you want it to be Cody and The Rock? Or would you want the introduction of maybe Hikuleo to be involved in this, and possibly somebody else on the outside? Do you want kind of guys who've already been intertwined into this overarching story, or would you prefer maybe some new blood in the bloodline?
No, I think The Rock and Cody, it just kind of makes sense because Cody's worked with the bloodline. He's had angles with them, and it would definitely make it for a much more intriguing opportunity to see, more must-see. So why not? And I think that you're starting to see The Rock a little bit more on social media, and it's just going to be great to see as it plays out. And because then when that happens, then you can start to introduce the new members, based on, I think that's kind of how they've always done it, is that, they introduce a member typically at an event, and then you go from there. So we'll see what happens. And I can't wait as it approaches, because we're going to have to decipher who needs to go over the most. And in the end, it's kind of starting right now, 55-45, that the new bloodline might need to get over, which could cause the dissent in the, you look at it and you say, wouldn't it be great to see Jey versus Roman? Wouldn't it be great to see, that just sounds like money, doesn't it? See it again, but from a different angle.
Yeah.
Because we've seen it before, and you see it again with Jay at a much different spot, where actually maybe even Jay goes over. That's the stuff you can start to entertain. Or maybe you go and you just say Roman has to go off and take care of Sami Zayn for once and for all, and keep it bumping. So it's just all a bunch of great ideas that you can kind of surmise can be put together. So it's just going to be fun to see. And that's what all you can ask for, is that everything in a setup that could happen could result in a lot of interesting angles and matches, and that's all you can ask for. So it's just the anticipation level is at an all-time high. I can't wait to see the next few weeks.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I get a little bit nervous about the Cody and Rock aspect to this. I myself would like to see some new members. I get what you mean by storytelling, and these guys are already involved in it. There was a recent interview with Cody Rhodes where he basically said him and Roman don't really talk. They've had a couple of matches together, and if it isn't really involved in the match, they don't really talk about anything. They don't really even acknowledge each other. He feels that it goes back to when he was leaving WWE and he was trying to get stuff going with AEW. He ended up calling out Roman Reigns and used some very harsh words when he called Roman Reigns out. He said that he apologized to him about it, but there's still maybe some hurt feelings there, and they don't necessarily discuss. Even when it comes to the matches, most of the time it's the producers who are the go-betweens. They don't really talk to each other. So I would find it to be interesting if it is Cody Rhodes who is, in fact, if we do go to a fifth man, he is that fifth man. Because it sounds like there is some upset history between two of the biggest guys in WWE right now.
And also, too, cause professional jealousy. I mean, Roman wants to be Cody. And in the end, no matter how well paid you are, no matter what, you just put in like 3 good years of being the champion, and now you see somebody else who potentially is getting the benefit of basically it's like Roman did his job, right? But in the end, the economy of the wrestling business made it so that Cody could take advantage, because, when you see all these new records, yes, there's interest, but at the same token, all WWE is doing is taking ticket prices from $200 to $400. So Roman was the reason that this took place. So if you're Roman Reigns, you're like, damn, I built this good. I took advantage of it. I got a great situation, and I built the mountain. I helped build this house, and then the next guy gets to come in, do his thing, where he can take advantage, where he left. He left when the construction was happening. He saw, we got construction delays, union delays, and he was like, I'm out. I'm going to go do another project. And then when the penthouse is built, he comes in and sits in it. So you got to be a little bit mad. You're like, damn, I built this, and now this guy gets to sit on the throne. And now it's and also too, we are all creatures of the moment, where everybody's like, Cody's the man, and he's shattering records, and he's going to be the number one all-time guy. And Cody does not hesitate to say, kind of sit there and with his Rolexes on, sit there and kind of take advantage of saying, hey, I'm the guy. But he's earned it in some level. But you could exactly see where Roman would be like, what the hell? I helped build this. I don't want to sit there and crown the guy that's taken my spot and getting praise for actually now. Pretty soon, if Cody has the title for a year or two, at this economic rate of what's going on with Netflix and all that, Cody Rhodes is going to set the mark for money generated that might never be beaten, ever.
And how much of that does Roman really see after, like you said, he kind of helped come in and lay the foundation, help build it all up? And you're right, he's not there to really reap the rewards or get the benefits like a guy like Cody, who just kind of came into it. So, look, I totally get what you're saying. Believe me, I understand that more than probably most. So I totally get it. Moving on, we've got the introduction of a new mid-card women's championship. We now have a U.S. women's championship. I believe we'll probably be getting an Intercontinental Championship on Monday Night Raw coming up this week. What do you think about the new mid-card women's championships?
Because that's tough to kind of sell. It's a lot of titles. We talk about other companies and their titles. I think that in theory, it's a good idea. You want to elevate more people, but I just think the timing's off. You got to do a little bit more with the women. And maybe this is the way to jumpstart it in a way that involves belts. But I've always of the belief that the wrestler makes the belt, and the wrestlers with the most over talent deserve it. But, this is one way to spark it. Maybe this is what they're saying is that, look, we need to get some more attention on these ladies, and the ones that will get it will be in these title feuds. So I can see both sides of it, but I would have liked to have seen the work done behind the scenes to get the ladies a little bit more over.
Look, I think it's a great call. I love this. I think these have been needed for a long time. The women's roster, I don't want to say it's bloated because it's definitely not, but the women's roster has expanded so much. And when you only have the one belt, it's really hard to highlight and help elevate other stars. If Becky Lynch was still in this company, it would really be Becky Lynch, Rhea Ripley, and because Liv Morgan has the championship, it would be Liv Morgan. You have a lot of great women wrestlers that you could be doing other storylines with, creating other story arcs with, and the title, though it's a prop, helps to kind of convey that message. I think this is a fantastic idea. I think this is needed. The men have multiple championships. Why not the women? I think this is a really, really good idea. And I think this will help integrate more women into more storylines and help elevate them faster up the card. You've seen it with a guy like Gunther. You're seeing it kind of with a guy like Braun Breaker. These mid-card championships, they're there. They're kind of, you're earning your stripes, you're doing your thing, and then next thing you know, you're getting into the championship picture and you're being taken serious. You're being looked at as credible because of your time with those belts. So I think this will help do that. I think it's a fantastic idea. Let's switch gears. Let's move on to AEW here. Swerve Strickland confronts the Hurt Syndicate. Hurt Syndicate opens the show, and Swerve ends up coming out and confronts them. This was very, very brief, but I thought this was pretty fantastic. Basically, Swerve with chain in hand calls Bobby Lashley out, and they have a match set for Full Gear. What did you think about us moving to this match this quickly? Because although I loved this segment, I don't necessarily know if I love the fact that Bobby Lashley and Swerve Strickland are fighting this soon. What were your thoughts on this? Because, like I said, this was short, but there was a lot of stuff condensed into what was probably about 5 minutes.
Yeah, right? That's what was my note. I was like, damn, they crammed that in like 5 minutes. It was wild to see. Look, it's cool to see, hopefully, the Hurt Syndicate do their thing. But again, that's what AEW is a little bit struggling, is that they just, the nuance of the why, I just think is the tough part that they're falling into. It's just like, okay, Tony wants to see it, so we have an angle. It's like you could build it up a little bit more. You could have just, you could have just Bobby Lashley stand in the back and kind of observe Swerve a little bit, kind of talk, build up a friendship, or have a situation in which, Bobby Lashley's talking about wrestlers in the company, and he's like, I see a lot of people that have potential. Or you harken back to the time where Swerve was there, and you could say, just real simple, I could see where, certain people might not think you're good enough. I can see that, where you have Swerve lose a match, and you have then Bobby Lashley rubbing in the wounds a little bit, talking a little shit, and then you just kind of, basically, Tony just, likes to just throw it right out there. But at the same time, there's so much nuance and fun that you're just kind of erasing along the way. So, that's what makes it tough, but that's kind of how you got to look at it. I think that's what we've said. I think I said it 2 months ago. We can hearken and say that AEW should do it WWE's way, and that's what most people are liking. But if Tony's going to keep doing it this way, then he doesn't have to really. He hasn't been hit other than, attendance being down, ratings being down. All the wrestling podcasts are talking bad about AEW, but there's a little bit of bias. But at the same token, I just think Tony doesn't have to care. He's like, I'm just going to showcase, and his thesis is, I'm going to showcase what I want. I just got a bunch of fat checks that make my company profitable. So he's going to, in the end, in some weird cosmic way, he's going to have a profitable wrestling company where the success is less than what it was 3 years ago, which is crazy to think about in some aspect of why the television deal went down that way. But I'll look at it like, if Tony wants it, I'm curious to see it.
And then we ended up getting Ricochet throughout the show, kind of teasing a mystery partner. There was a little bit of interaction with the Hurt Syndicate, but he was teasing a mystery partner, and he kind of was leading you down this road. Well, maybe it was somebody from the Hurt Syndicate was going to team with him, or maybe we were going to get a guy like Mark Davis, who returned the week prior. He was Kyle Fletcher's former tag team partner, took a little bit of issue with the way with Kyle Fletcher and how he's been handling things, or maybe we were going to get Will Ospreay. Instead, turns out we got Powerhouse Hobbs, who's been on the shelf for about 6 months. He had a really bad knee injury in a match against John Moxley. Powerhouse Hobbs comes back and looks like he's a brick shithouse. Like, he does look like a powerhouse. Guy's in fantastic shape. What did you think about this? Because when Powerhouse came out, I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit let down. I was like, all right, well, Powerhouse is back. I was like, kind of feel like this was a long time coming, but I did not expect this. And it was one of those things where a lot of times when you don't expect it, it's a good thing. This was kind of I did not expect this, and it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. What did you make of this?
Exactly the best way to put it. It's like, oh, Powerhouse Hobbs. Okay. And, it's good to see. Good to see him back. Good to see him healthy. I think that, this will be the 8th time now on this podcast where we say maybe they can use Powerhouse Hobbs in a way where he can get over. So maybe the 8th time's the try in AEW.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Hopefully that they can get. I think he's got a fantastic look, right? I think he looks great. The guy looks incredible, and he's in this match alone. He did a lot of fantastic moves, but I just kind of feel like there's this disconnect with everybody else, and the way they kind of explained him having issues with the Don Callis family. I just, again, I feel like storytelling in AEW is just poor. It's poor at best.
And also, too, because I think, too, my note was, because that's kind of where, when you look at all the critiques and what people are saying, I think the number one thing that's accurate is, and you said it, it's character development. It's not developed. It's not refined. It's not nuanced. It's not peak. It's just, okay, here's Powerhouse Hobbs. Here's what we did. And then you get to a certain level. And then at some point, the guy has to go to another level with great promos, with great matches. And it just always feels like there's one wrench loose, one like screw loose in certain parts of everything. So when it's the right time for the person to take the next step, they get injured. Or when it's the next time for them to get a good promo, they flop it. Or when it's time for them to have the great match, they end up losing. So it's just, in the end, it takes a lot of work to make the chili perfect. And sometimes you add the right amount of salt, and then you realize, oh shoot, it's too hot. And then you realize, okay, the next time you do it, you don't have the right ingredients, you don't have the right flavor of chili pepper, you don't got the right thing. And then in the end, what ends up happening is it just takes work and work and work to figure it all out. But when injuries take place, when Tony keeps buying other guys and diluting the talent, it's just he cannot get the mix perfectly right where the character builds up the chain, has good character development, is interesting, can tell good promos, and have good matches. And it's like a 6-tool thing that you got to have consistently rolling all the time. And there's a lot of people that are talented that can do a lot of things. They got 2 tools, but there's always a weakness that potentially ends up costing them for some reason. And in AEW, it's just crazy for the manner in which it's the wildest amount of talent that you see top to bottom. I would argue that name value alone, they're better than WWE. But I'll say this, and here's the biggest indictment that we can say on this show. The biggest star in the world that came into AEW was Kazuchika Okada. Have we even said the man's name outside of being in a match in like a year? No. The man should be at the top of the forefront of this company. Okada, Takeshita, Will Ospreay. Instead, it's Moxley, it's Darby Allin, it's Christian Cage, it's Chris Jericho monopolizing time. So you got a lot of leaks. And basically, AEW is where you go to get a fat check and your character dies. That's the kind of thesis where we're at. and I hope they build it. But here's the crazy part is that that's what happens to the performers. But in the end, the company's doing great, which is not typically how it goes. But Tony Khan gets credit for that because in no other business do you sell less product, have less listeners, have less interest, and make more money. So kudos to Tony because that philosophy is crazy to look at.
Yeah, he's kind of figured it out. And speaking of less, this week, AEW Dynamite went up against NXT.
Ooh.
NXT did a fantastic job paying homage to ECW, getting a lot of ECW veterans in the building. Bubba Ray Dudley had a match with Trick Williams as his tag team partner, and they outpaced Dynamite. Dynamite was on its regular night at its regular time. NXT was the show that got moved. Generally, the show that gets moved from its normal time, normal night, struggles. NXT ended up, I think it was almost 100,000 more viewers, and they took the 18 to 25 or 18 to 35 demographic, which just kind of tells you where AEW is right now and kind of what that interest level is. NXT is able, again, I know that WWE doesn't like to look at it as a developmental brand, but WWE's developmental brand is beating your main show, beating your big show, and it's not even on their night. And I think that kind of tells you where AEW is right now. Why we come on this show and we kind of complain about stuff. And it's storytelling is all it is. Like the storytelling is lacking so much. You watched NXT this week. What did you think of NXT? And did it rightfully so mollywop AEW?
Yeah, it was great. The next stars are going to be great. Trick Williams. I think that WWE is doing a good job of having Bubba Ray Dudley do his thing. And here's the thing. He's on a big hit Sirius XM radio show. So he can go on there and throw little nuggets of digs against AEW. It's biased. But at the same token, he wants the company to do well. But at the same time, he can also promote that he's going to be on NXT. So it's a little bit weird to see the NXT show and stuff like that have a guy that does media in it as well. So that's always that fine little delicate balance. But he's a superstar, WWE Hall of Famer. So it's always good. And the nostalgia, look, and here's the thing is that a lot of people kind of hearken AEW's violence to being like ECW. So, people were excited to see RVD, Francine, Dawn Marie, which I didn't even know she was alive still. So it was cool to see them kind of get back to, a phase of wrestling that was really nostalgic. And it was great to see them get the tables. It was just a great show. Ethan Page is a star that AEW, really perfect example. Ethan Page is a star, and AEW treated him like a mid-card guy. And you can see the charisma. You could see what he can bring when highlighted and when highlighted properly. And he doesn't have to always win, but he's in high-profile matches and he can talk and he's got something to give. And I think that when you introduce Hall of Famers to work with young people, it's just going to be fun. I thought maybe Bubba would turn on Trick. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, but the crowd was into it, and I do think that NXT was a little bit better than AEW.
Yeah, it's, I really do think it just comes down to simple things, right? It is just telling good stories, man. That's it. And putting guys who have talent in spots to be successful. That's all you got to do. And maybe AEW will kind of work off some of those rough edges, but NXT's doing its thing. Really, really good show. Really good programming to go against AEW on its off night, and a great way to win the ratings battle between the two. You ready for some news and notes?
Hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made your list?
This major wrestling star is making his return at this past weekend's New Japan Pro Wrestling Power Struggle 2024 event. Former AEW World Champion Kenny Omega may have revealed his return opponent. Omega, making his first return to New Japan Pro Wrestling since Wrestle Kingdom 17 in 2023, cut an in-ring promo where he spoke about wanting to make his in-ring return as an AEW star in a New Japan Pro Wrestling ring. Omega is setting his sights on the Wrestle Dynasty show on January 5th, 2025, where he stated that he wanted to face one of the new stars of New Japan if he's cleared to compete. After his in-ring promo, Kenny Omega got into a backstage fight with reigning New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong Openweight champion Gabe Kidd. Omega and Kidd traded barbs on social media earlier this year, with the New Japan Pro Wrestling star calling out the former IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Omega has not wrestled since November of 2023 last year in AEW after suffering diverticulitis, which has kept him out of the ring. Now, this WWE wrestler will be sidelined for a while. In an Instagram post, Carl Anderson has confirmed that he underwent surgery, and he shares his journey to recovery as he thanks the doctor who did the procedure. Anderson elaborated on what might be in store for his future by including an important timeline in his message. In his Instagram post, he has a photo of himself seemingly post-surgery, given the hospital bed and the cardiac monitoring leads stuck to his body. Anderson has a shout out for his surgeon and shared more when he will. Anderson had a shout out for his surgeon and shared when more will be revealed. Anderson wrote, "Thanks to Dr. Dugas in Birmingham, Alabama for fixing me. See you after WrestleMania. Hashtag WWE, hashtag WWE Raw. Details on this week's Talk and Shop dropping Thursday a.m. Link in bio at Talk and Shop podcast. Monday Night Raw tonight at WWE." Anderson was last seen on NXT television when the OC tag team of himself and Luke Gallows lost to Hank Walker and Take Ledger on September 24th, with a subsequential dark match appearance in Chicago the following week. It sounds like Anderson's going to be out for at least 5 months. That'll put him back after WrestleMania, if we do the math correctly. Could this wrestler be heading back to WWE? On Wednesday night's episode of Dynamite, Malachi Black took on Adam Cole. At the end of the match, Black essentially invited Cole to kick him with his finisher, and then after the match, Black and Cole hugged in the middle of the ring. This led some people to wonder if this was a send-off for Black, as there have been rumors about him exiting AEW so he can return to WWE. Fightful Select reports that while there's no official confirmation of anything yet, the word backstage in AEW recently has been that Malachi Black's deal could end in late 2024 or early 25, depending on whether AEW exercises its extension clauses. When Tony said in 2022 that Black was signed for almost 5 years, that 5 years reportedly included the optional year, so now it's a case of whether those are activated by AEW or not. If they're not, his deal would seemingly be up very soon. Black publicly stated in 2022 that he had requested his release from AEW, with many believing he wanted to return to WWE, but the release wasn't granted, as AEW essentially didn't want to release anyone who could just end up going straight to WWE, as there were others in the same boat around that time. It was also worth mentioning that there's no confirmation at this point that a WWE return would be Black's next move if he does leave AEW, but when he requested his release in 2022, that was believed to be his desire. Recently, Black went on Instagram and posted something, basically said, "Look, I'm not retiring. Everybody always thinks I'm retiring." This was basically Adam Cole saying, "Thank you for the match. Adam Cole's a great competitor," yada, 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 yada. The big thing coming out of this is we now have more of a confirmation on when Malachi Black / Aleister Black's contract will be expiring from AEW, and it sounds like it is a little bit more current than we originally thought. It sounds like it's going to possibly be at the end of this year or possibly early next year. He could be leaving. He seems incredibly unhappy in AEW. Remember, his wife works in WWE. That is Zelina Vega. I believe he wants to go back and be with her. We'll see what happens. Only time will tell. WWE signs a new Bloodline member. Last year, it was reported by Fightful Select that Lance Anoa'i was granted his release from MLW and was a free agent. Given his family ties, many had speculated that Lance's next move following his free agency would be WWE, and that is seemingly the case. Referee Felix Fernandez shared an online photo of Lance Anoa'i in an NXT outfit alongside other WWE Performance Center talent, which led to much speculation about his status with the company. In an update from Fightful Select, Those in the company who spoke to Fightful confirmed that Anoa'i signed with the company this summer, but was suddenly sidelined with an injury. Lance is not eminently factored into creative plans for NXT or the main roster, and likely won't be cleared for a while. And that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes.
Yes, sir. We didn't get to it, but I can surmise that we thought that SmackDown was the best show this week with everything that went on and everything like that. Can we agree?
Yes, totally
Yes.
agree.
SmackDown, show of the week. A lot of good stuff going on in the world of wrestling. TNA is taking strides forward, good tapings, everything going on with them, and great work for the company to honor and respect Chris Bay with all the charitable work that they've done to raise money. All the contributions from across the many companies have been just outstanding, with the thousands of dollars that active pro wrestlers are giving Chris Bay as he recovers from a severe injury that he suffered in Detroit. It's a great sign, and everything's going on. And TNA is just continuing to take strides with good shows, really respectable storylines, and characters that are doing a lot of good things to draw attention to the company. So they're getting more run, and it was a good week of wrestling all the way around as the companies continue to position themselves in the fall, and some good stuff is happening. So make sure everything goes on. Make sure you pay attention to everything going on in the world of wrestling. Follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Make sure that anywhere that you enjoy your favorite audio content, type in Detroit Sports Podcast, as our content will find you. And as the world has changed, the star of WrestleMania 23 is now in a very high office. So that's very interesting, and maybe some individuals that he's had ties with will also have prominent roles in his administration. So the world of wrestling is just seeping into everything in the world of Hollywood, entertainment, sports, and it's just fun to be a part of, to talk wrestling and watch the shows and to kind of see the maneuvering of the business and where it's at, and the wildness of how everything is going now that you got to pay attention to a company like WWE that's global. They're doing stuff overseas all the time. They're flying all over the place. It's just a wild spot to be in. And AEW is just trying to kind of stay afloat, but they have a nice, fat, healthy net to help them bounce if they continue to tumble. Can't wait, cause for next weekend, when we can fire it up again and talk about the great world of professional wrestling on the next episode of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.